I'm going to show you a little known secret to legally, morally, and ethically steal houses. Literally steal houses. Now, I've never showed this before, and for the first time, I'm going to allow you to rip off and steal this strategy from me. So in essence, you're going to steal how to steal houses. That's a lot of stealing, but I have to warn you, this technique will not work if you try and use it for evil. Sounds contradictory, but the truth is it will backfire on you if you don't have the best of intentions. You've been warned. Now, even though I'm called the godfather of wholesaling, I can't take full credit for this technique. I didn't invent it. I actually learned it first from my friend, mentor, and business partner, Cody Hoffine. But I can tell you this, since I learned and mastered this technique years ago, I went from buying distressed houses at a discount to literally stealing houses, legally of course. And on this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can too, following 4 very specific steps. But first, I want to tell you about Frank. Frank lived in this house in Ortonville, Michigan. Frank was 60 years old and in very poor health. When we first met Frank, he was hooked up to an oxygen tank for breathing and almost entirely confined to a wheelchair. He had lived in his home for a long time. He raised his daughter in this home. But now she left to go to college, and due to his failing health, he was no longer able to care for his home and really needed to sell and downsize into an apartment. The problem was Frank was unable to sell his home traditionally using a real estate agent because his home was unsafe for people to come see it. Over the years, Frank had collected so much stuff that his house was full of belongings from floor to ceiling in every room, including the basement and 2 garages. There was literally narrow paths to go from room to room, and Frank hadn't personally gone down in the basement in years. So here's what we did for Frank. We purchased his home, gave him 45 days to continue living in the home after selling it. We completely emptied everything out of his home and put the things he wanted to keep in a nearby storage unit. Everything else we hauled away. We found him an apartment nearby his daughter's college that facilitated his needs, and we even packed and moved him in. We also found him a mobile healthcare provider to attend to his ongoing health needs. We did all of that for Frank. Now here's the thing. When I first met Frank and we started discussing the possibility of me buying his house, Frank told me that the Zillow value of his home was $400,000, which it was, and that he would be willing to sell it to me for $375,000. I ended up stealing it for $200,000, which was half of its value and $175,000 less than Frank's initial asking price. Afterwards, I flipped his house for a $60,000 net profit, but that's not the whole story or the point of the story. Frank told me afterwards that we literally saved his life and he was eternally grateful.
I just want you to understand, you've been an absolute lifesaver for us. I want you to understand that.
In tears, his daughter called me to personally thank me for helping her dad out of a life-threatening situation. So how did I legally, morally, and ethically steal this house, and how can you do the same? Let me show you my 4-step process. Step 1 is the most important step. If you skip this step or do it wrong, not only will it not work, but it will backfire on you and you'll get chased off the porch with a shotgun. Now, this may sound odd, but you have to genuinely care about the seller. You have to find out their pain, listen to their story, and sincerely care about their situation. You have to effectively convey empathy and, first and foremost, be willing to do the right thing. Years ago, when I served a 2-year proselyting church mission in Argentina, we called this BRT, which stands for Build a Relationship of Trust. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. With this house in Michigan, Frank had spoken to other buyers willing to pay much more than me, but Frank decided to sell it to me at a lower price. Why? Because first and foremost, he felt like I genuinely cared and wanted to help him.
Like the biggest hug ever, like you don't even know.
Say that again. You want to give me a big virtual hug? Is that what you said?
Yeah. When you eventually get to town, we'd like to at least have a coffee with you, if nothing else.
Yeah, I'll try to do that. That would be great. I would have really liked that too.
We're both diabetics, so we really can't drink. That doesn't mean you can't, but you know.
I don't drink anyway, so it's all good. This is why you can't do this technique for evil, and you can't fake it. A seller will know, even if subconsciously, if you're being manipulative. So if you don't have good intentions, stop right here and don't watch the rest of this video. Remember, most sellers care more about certainty than about price. That is to say, the seller's confidence that you can perform is more important than price. Now, part of the step of BRT, or building a relationship of trust, is uncovering what we call the 4 pillars of motivation. Is the property in some kind of disrepair? Is the seller facing a pressing financial hardship? Is there urgency to sell the property? And is the seller willing to sell at a discounted price? By the way, nothing is more powerful to BRT than meeting sellers in person at the kitchen table. Eyeball to eyeball and belly to belly gives you a strong competitive advantage over other virtual wholesalers who are trying to close solely on the phone. If you succeed at BRT and if you successfully uncover motivation, you're ready for step 2. Step 2 is to find out the seller's asking price before you offer or present your price. There's an old adage that says, "He who names the price first loses." Simply ask the seller, what price are you hoping to get for your property? And keep in mind, this step where you find out the seller's price first doesn't have to be after step 1, building a relationship of trust. I often follow the same approach as my good friend, the king closer, RJ Bates. Now, RJ will ask a seller in the first 30 to 60 seconds of his initial call with a seller, what price do you want for your home? Now, RJ believes, and I agree with him, that every seller has a starting price, and asking that price right out of the gate is a natural way to start the conversation. Whatever price they say may not be their bottom line, most times it's not, but they always have a price in mind. Getting the seller to verbally reveal that price psychologically puts you in the negotiating driver's seat. It establishes, even if subconsciously, that the seller needs you, not you need the seller. You're essentially saying, tell me your price and I'll tell you if I can pay it. It allows you to take control of the conversation because you're essentially saying, tell me why I should buy your house.
Why are we not trying to make the seller sell us?
Make him pitch me.
Yes.
Now, if the seller won't give a price first, it's probably because you haven't established BRT well enough. And if that's the case, go away from price, focus on BRT, and come back to price later. Now, I call this Me Too questions. Me Too questions are where you find out things you have in common so you can say, Me too. You might say, are you married? Me too. How long have you been married? 27 years? That's incredible. Tell me, I've only been married for 10 years. What's your secret to a happy marriage? Okay, building trust. Then after creating a stronger BRT, come back to price by saying something like, now, Mr. Jones, about selling your house, surely you have a price in mind, and ask again his price. Now, one tip I learned from RJ is if they're still reluctant to give a price first, say something like, if you're thinking that I might offer higher than your asking price, I can guarantee you that won't happen. Now, this is a lighthearted way of getting the seller to open up to you. If and only if you succeed at steps 1 and 2, step 3 is what we call the anchor. Now, the anchor is where you give the seller your starting price. There are 3 things you must do for the anchor to work. Number 1, it can't be an official offer. It needs to be vague. For example, don't say, the most I can pay is $100,000. That's a definitive offer, and later if you come up on that price, you lose integrity and violate trust. Instead, say something like, in the perfect world, I would be at $100,000. Or in the perfect world, I'd be at the tax value of $100,000. Or I bet you're getting offers from other investors for around $100,000. Notice how those examples are not definitive, but more like a range or a ballpark. Now, the second thing for the anchor to work is it needs to be ridiculously low. This gives you room to come up some and still get a great deal. And the third thing is the anchor needs to solicit a no. If the seller doesn't say no, you didn't anchor low enough. Now again, don't give the anchor unless you first did a really good job of BRT, or your anchor will be offensive and you'll get chased off the porch with a shotgun. And finally, step 4 is to come up to your desired buy price. This allows the seller to feel like you're coming his way and willing to give up something too. So let me show you what this might look like with my deal with Frank. When I offered my low anchor price of $180,000, he replied that there's no way he could go that low, but he wasn't offended. Perfect. That means I anchored correctly. So I responded by saying, yeah, I figured as much. That's my price in a perfect world, but how close can you get to that price? Very powerful. Let me say it again. Yes, how close can you get to that price? Now at this point, since I did steps 1 and 2 correctly, Frank had already mentally decided to sell to me. It was just a matter of agreeing on price. When I asked Frank how close he could get to my anchor price, he immediately came down from $375,000 to $250,000. That's a $125,000 price reduction.
I'd like to get 250, but I would talk a little lower.
I responded by saying, Frank, for a fast and convenient as-is all-cash offer with occupancy after closing, moving your belongings into storage, and helping you find and move into a new apartment, tell me, how much is an offer like that worth it to you? What would an offer like that look like? What would a price like that need to be for you? He thought about it a second and came back and said, I could come down to $215,000.
Take a look at it. See if you can do somewhere between 215 and 220.
So I said, I was really hoping to stay under 200,000, but I want to help you, and I don't think anyone else is going to be able to take care of you as good as my team can. So I'll tell you what, I'm willing to come up from 180 all the way to 200,000 if you'll commit right now. And Frank thought about it a second and said, all right, I'll do it. I really like you, Jerry. Let's do it.
There is nothing you're telling me that I don't already know because...
So I got the deal for $200,000 and flipped it for a $60,000 profit. Now, if you think that was brilliant and you plan on ripping off and stealing my strategy to steal houses legally, leave a comment and say, Jerry, that is brilliant. You are a flipping genius. But there's one other thing I did with Frank that I want to point out that's very important to lock in the seller, and that's to get a final commitment. So after Frank said yes to $200,000, I said to Frank, I'm going to draft up an agreement about everything we just discussed. Is there anything that would prevent you from approving that agreement right now so that we can officially move forward? To which he replied that he would sign right now. Now, this is a powerful way to make sure that the seller honors his commitment and also make sure that there aren't any unresolved concerns. So, to quickly review the 4 steps to legally steal houses. Step 1, BRT, build a relationship of trust. Step 2, get the seller to name their price first. Step 3, give the anchor. Step 4, settle at your desired price. Now, once you implement these 4 steps and start to legally steal houses, I'll buy them. I have systems and capital in place, and I'm looking for good deals that I can flip. So for every good deal that you get that meets my criteria, I'll pay you $10,000. If that sounds exciting, go to my10kcheck.com to register for a free training to learn all the details. Now, to really make sure my 4-step process to legally steal houses sinks in, I want you to watch a video interview I did with my business partner, Jordan Budd, on a deal in North Carolina, where the seller wanted $260,000, but we stole the deal for $100,000 and then wholesaled it for a $40,000 profit. It's an inspiring and fascinating story, so watch that now, and I'll see you on the next video.